Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Venngage. Venngage is a design platform not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but it takes it a notch higher with built-in accessibility features. Whether you're looking to run an accessibility check on your designs or export them to the PDF UA format, Venngage has you covered. So head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm director of media productions here at Chax Training Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and learn more. How you doing, Chad?
Doing well. It is hot here in the East Coast.
Oh, is it? Really?
I know. Oh, man, it's like upper 90s, humidity like in the 90s,
It's kind of
I'm
nice
inside.
It's been nice here. I've got my concrete coming today for my koi pond. So new
nice.
Milestone for getting it officially halfway done. So I'm hoping to get it done by, really honestly, if I'm telling the truth, I hope to get it done before the end of the year. But my goal was to have it done by October. I think that's not going to happen.
Well, at least you don't have to worry about the ground freezing, do you?
No, not at all. We don't have that at all.
You got a little more time than I do.
Yeah. No, and the hole is dug. So, it is a good thing. Well, Chad, today we're having on our guest that we've actually kind of talked about and hinted about having come on the show. Sonya Lewis, who is a UX researcher and accessibility designer. And she's also the accessibility lead for Sunflower. And she's here to share her story. Sonya, welcome to the program.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. And thank you for having me.
Awesome.
It's hot in Austin too, so believe me.
Oh, is it? Oh, Austin's always hot, right?
Like 70 something days in a row. It's been 100 degrees. So
Oh my gosh. That is brutal. Well, we're really excited to have you on the show because, this is a topic, today's topic, guys, if you didn't know, it's about reading order. It's a follow-up to the podcast we did a couple episodes ago. And if you haven't had a chance to go listen to that podcast, go listen. The title of the podcast is, Do I Really Need to Set the Reading Order? And Sonya had reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, I have a podcast idea for you. How about talking about the reading order? And I said, well, it's funny that you mentioned that because we talk about that all the time, right? Yeah. And it's usually because people say, I don't want to, only the tags matter and only the tags tree. And Sonya, you brought up a very interesting point about screen readers and the accessibility of the entire environment, not just inside a PDF. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, as someone who works in the field, I see this all the time when I go in and I try to look at the documents, make sure that they're as accessible as possible. But for myself, I notice that a lot of times with PDFs, they read all over the place. I call it reading spaghetti. So there may be where the information where it should be reading down the page, it's reading something in the body text, and then it goes up to the top, and then it might go down to the very bottom, but it makes no logical sense. I've noticed this in benefits materials. I've noticed this a lot of times in documents, like just help documents. When I turn on anything like Read Aloud, if I turn on NVDA, if I turn on Speechify, any of the tools that I use. And what happens is my cognitive load just totally increases, and then I can't make heads or tails of the information. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, who would I reach out to learn more about how to fix this? And of course, we met at Access U this year. So we had a little conversation in the cafeteria there. So I thought of you and said, hey, let's get in touch. And here we are.
We're so glad you reached out to us, Sonya.
Sure.
And so can you tell us again, like, what are the tools that you personally use to read documents?
Yeah, so I read through mainly text to speech tools. So the ones that are basically in my tech environment or my tech stack are going to be things like Speechify and things like Read Aloud. So the immersive reader that's built into Microsoft products, the Read Aloud, is one that I would use a lot for work. Whether it's trying to use it within like Word docs or PowerPoint materials. And then specifically for PDFs, it brings up a completely different browser, and then it has the read aloud ability. So I do try to go through there. The problem, getting back to what you said earlier, is that, the information isn't created in a certain kind of order, or no one's clicking on read order or whatever it is. So it ends up being the spaghetti. And speaking of Canva, I know that was your topic last week. I actually had a career coach work with me on a new resume, and she created it in Canva. And then we got the PDF of it. And I actually recorded a Loom, LOOM, which is like a screen recorder where you can actually take picture of whatever it is, share screen, and then add a soundtrack. So I could show her the spaghetti reading order. And I know she was trying her best, and I know they've got an initiative going on there. So, I want to give them a pass, but at the end of the day, even like resumes, things that affect a lot of times the people in the disability community more despairingly than some of the other groups that we might be talking to. We need as much help as we can to have these documents be as accessible as possible, because there's a very good chance that if you're applying for any kind of accessibility job, that somebody on the team is also going to have an accessibility need. So we've got to make sure that these documents that we're putting out there when we're applying, that there are things that are accessible. So it can go both ways. It can be both something that the person who's applying for a job can struggle with if they're using something like a Canva document versus doing their just Microsoft Word and seeing if it actually reads out as a Word document.
So I would ask you, Sonya, what would you say to people that say you're using the wrong tool? That accessibility, if you're reading, if you need to have something accessible, you need to be using JAWS or NVDA. Those are real accessibility tools, and anything else, that's your problem, not theirs. What would you say to those people?
Well, I would respect that they have that opinion, but I would also say that there is a huge continuum between when a person gets a diagnosis with, let's say, a loss of sight or other things, that there's a whole period of time there that you have to get comfortable with what you're comfortable with. And it takes a lot of skill to be able to effectively use those tools. Like, I am by no means a super user of JAWS or NVDA, but I have used NVDA quite a bit. It's free. It's something you can download. You can do a proxy of what that might read out as, and you're still like having some of the issues, but I don't know all the shortcuts. I don't know all the other things.
Right.
So I think that they would need to recognize that there's a journey and a continuum of sight loss or other things, and for them to not just expect people to go right from Mrs. Jones, you're losing your eyesight, directly to super user of these different tools. I think we're missing a whole bunch of people in the middle. What about magnifiers? What about text-to-speech tools? There's a whole group of people, like 5 million people have downloaded Speechify. That number probably is up now with students back in school, but there's a whole lot of people in the middle. So I think that that's a little short-sighted, or maybe a lot short-sighted, if you will, to only focus on that, because there's a whole lot of other things we can do with accessibility that is in our control. We've got color contrast, we've got font, we've got a lot of those other things. And then, of course, UX research, that's what we do. We try to understand where are some of those issues, challenges, and concerns. And I can pre-test things as much as I can, using the tools that I have. But nothing beats actually talking to people with lived experience.
Well, it's just great to have you on, Sonya, because, we live in a time period where everybody expects software to be discoverable, right? Like, everybody expects to be able to use software without reading directions, without having any knowledge, and just kind of figure it out, right? And Dax and I will attest that JAWS and NVDA are not like that, right? Like
No.
not even close, right? And so you bring up a fantastic point, Sonya, that you know we're constantly trying to understand the experience for people with disabilities, and what you just described is really kind of goes quite a bit deeper than even how Dax and I view it, because you're talking about the experience of losing a cognitive function in one way, shape, or form, right? And going through that process and figuring out, okay, how am I going to adapt? How am I going to now figure out how to live my life in this different way, and what tool am I going to use to make that happen? I mean, it's really, really a great perspective, that you're bringing to the table here.
In fact, anybody who listens to the podcast know I have a little micro farm. We have visitors quite a bit, and they come and tour the farm. One of the groups that came was a senior group who do photography. And so they wanted to come and photograph the chickens and the alpaca and all that stuff. And as they were talking and they asked what I did, I explained it. And one of them actually called me after they had left and said, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm losing my sight. I'm trying to do as much photography as I can." I actually pointed her to the Nikon camera now. They have a Nikon camera that actually beams the image through the viewfinder directly onto your retina. So if you have any cataract issues at all, it bypasses all of that and allows you to be a photographer longer. Unfortunately, her issue didn't help her, but she had said, "Hey, can you help me understand where I'm going? Where I'm going to be from a functionality standpoint? I know that I'm
Wow.
losing my sight. I need to start learning these tools now before I'm completely blind, so that I have some semblance of what's going on." Because she goes, "I can't imagine what it's going to be like when I have no sight, trying to understand all these tools."
That's exactly
Right.
right. Because, even with like my healthcare provider background before UX, my life before UX, life after UX, we don't often, as part of our healthcare journey, think about those kinds of things. Like, doctors are not trained on this. And one of the things that
Right.
Sunflower is trying to do is to help with that perspective. So continuing education, for providers to get them ready for things. So it goes right back to your story. It's a journey, and it's something that if
Yeah.
we don't understand where the user is coming from when we're designing things and we're choosing, what tools are we testing with, we can't just test at the extreme here anymore, because people are coming to this place. We're getting older. We're losing things all the time. So for her to be that self-aware and to say that, I mean, that's a huge trust piece too, that she felt comfortable enough
Right.
around you to say that. So I thought that's a great story. Great story.
Well, and Chad, you and I hear this all the time from both education professionals and people in the healthcare industry. I've got enough to do. I now have to be an accessibility expert on top of, what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get this content out. And we hear that over and over again. And the answer is, in most cases, if you're using Word, it's really hard to get the reading order incorrect. But
Mhm.
as soon as you move outside of Word, or maybe PowerPoint to a certain extent, lesser for sure, but any of the other programs, it's how you design the file. That reading order really is mostly how you created the document. And we don't always start at the top and work our way down to the bottom, right? And so in InDesign, your layers actually dictate your reading order. And so that's why we try to teach people it is possible to set the reading order. Doing it at the end in the PDF is a huge pain in the butt, but it's less of a pain in the butt if you do it in the source file, right, Chad?
Absolutely. And what's interesting, right? You talk to a lot of people and they're like, well, most pages are read, upper left hand corner across going down. And you know this, Dax, as graphic designers, as a designer, you're taught to leverage the call to attention,
Right.
The call to attention is that piece of element on the page that's supposed to draw your eye to it first. That's the
Right.
first thing you do. And that's what we try to mimic, right, with not only the tag order but the reading order as well. We're trying to provide an equivalent experience, to whoever's trying to read this document, But you're right, Dax, and we're getting into a slightly different topic. But the people who say, like, I got enough to do, I got enough on my plate. What really where the problem is the lack of support from above.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Right? Those people know that this is something they should do, that they know it's important, but they're being tasked with doing all this extra work on top of what they normally do without the support from the powers that be.
Well,
right?
and often it's no
that's
training.
really-
Right, Chad?
Well, sure.
Yeah, no training. It's go figure it out on YouTube, or there's got to be tutorials somewhere online for you to figure this out. It's accessibility. It's just a thing, right? You press the accessibility checker inside Acrobat, and you just fix a few things. And they don't understand that you would never take your car to a mechanic who learned on YouTube. Right. I mean, as much as I love YouTube, I know there's so many times I watch a YouTube video and what I end up with at the end of what I thought was, yes, I've got it, is far from perfect.
Yeah. And that's the challenge too. Just like anything online, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
Right. I see it all the time. People send me documents that they put together, and I'm just like, what were you doing? Like, what I don't even understand where you even, but I could tell that they found like an old article from 10 years ago that said, oh, use the XML pane in Adobe InDesign to, you know what I mean? And I'm like, whoa.
Well,
So
we were just talking about this before, where somebody put a number in one text box and then the title in the other text box instead of just using a numbered list, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just working on that project this morning, and it's just wrong, right? I don't know what else to say. It's just not the right way to do it, So, it just creates a lot of challenges at so many levels along the way, right? And Dax, you and I truly believe education is certainly the answer to solving these problems, right? It's not going to happen on its own. It's getting that information out there to people, educating people, explaining to them what does need to happen, and explaining to them why the reading order is important, right?
And having Sonya here is a perfect example of that. And when people tell us all the time, I mean, before I knew Sonya's story, people would say, well, why do I need to set the reading order? And we would always fall back to the WCAG principle of robust, that the number 4 principle of the WCAG principle says that your content must be readable by current and future user agents. It doesn't say by JAWS and NVDA. It says by user agents, and Speechify and Read Aloud are definitely Dragon Naturally Speaking. Those are
Text
user
help.
agents. Text helps, read and write, right? Those are all user agents. Now they happen to use a reading order. It would be different if we couldn't set the reading order, or you needed some special program to run it through some other thing, some other filter that costs, a large amount of money. But it's just simply going into another panel and just making sure that order follows the same order that the content you want to be read in. And it's a pain in the butt sometimes, but it's possible. And it's definitely, the impact we see is definitely not slight, and feeling inclusive. Sonya, you were talking about, starting to go to apply to a job or being, a new hire and having these struggles. I got to believe that at some point you kind of go, what did I really get myself into? Do these people really understand what my, if I belong here? Right.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't scream that out. I mean, that is something that I don't think that they're understanding. So, in terms of speaking the language, like if you are in an employee resource group, or if you are someone who has a disability and you've been struggling with, like, how do I tell my manager, or when do I speak up about this? Sometimes it's better to show, not tell. So one of the things that I've learned along the way is to use a loom. That's the tool that I use often to just kind of shed a light on where some of that is. Because it's one thing for me to say that it's a problem, and it's another thing for me to
Right.
show them. But I've had, like benefits materials or a training that everybody's required to do, and it didn't even read out the headline for that page. So there was very little
Ah,
content that was even scalable or scannable or crawlable or whatever it is that these tools are using. So clearly, it was not that comparable experience that we want to create that says, hey, you are welcome here. We are diverse and inclusive. We want everyone to take on these benefits. This is what we're providing. We value people, and so on and so forth. And I don't think that the people who are in charge of this, I don't think that they're thinking necessarily that way. But at the end of the day, it
right.
ties right back to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Yeah.
So, even how you create your materials, are we even thinking about the what is it, the reading order in terms of like having a different title for every page on the PowerPoint presentation that's part of our benefit slides. I mean, these are like
Right.
little things that, just little things that they could be doing. But back to your point, I don't think that, on top of everything else that they've got, plus, all the people that were quitting and now all the job issues that are going on, the economy and everything else, that's not their first priority, or at least it doesn't seem to be. So, it's one of those things that's gotten lost in the shuffle, but it's a huge opportunity that companies could embrace. They could learn how to do this, have their marketing teams and other people, get trained up on this, and make sure that going forward, if they're going to put something out to market or if they're going to create something that everybody's required to take, that everybody should have access to that information.
Now, Sonia, with Speechify, obviously it reads the content, in
Mhm.
the order, but it doesn't announce if it's a heading or not, does it?
It doesn't. It reads it as if like my
Okay.
best friend was reading it to me, or Snoop Dogg. I mean, you can like pick the different voices that you have. I mean, you can tailor all of that. I mean, it's a great program. But even if a document is not set up correctly, I've noticed that it still can run into problems. It'll say there is no content to read. So if there
Right.
is no
Right.
No
content
tags
to read,
available.
yet if it
Yeah.
says that, then you're kind of out of luck. So then again, that's when I would take the screenshot and kind of do a quick loom on it and say, this is something that's a problem. It does give you an option in some places to take a picture to see if it can actually like read it as a picture. But it doesn't always work. So even the tools that
Yeah.
we have as the workarounds for the read alouds and other things like that, and not ready yet for NVDAs, there's still a gap there. And I think this is
Sure.
a huge opportunity area.
Have you gotten Snoop Dogg to read a document to you?
Yes, absolutely. And it's wonderful to hear Snoop Dogg, of all people, right, reading about accessibility. I mean, how cool would that be if I'm a high school student, or if I'm somebody who
Oh,
might
yeah.
track with his music a little bit more, to have him be reading this out, I wouldn't feel so, othered, if you will, sometimes as somebody who has dyslexia or whatever it is that's keeping me from being able to read, just like my friends do. So I think that's a great thing that they added in, and then they give you all these other choices. You can do a British voice, you could do another language. I mean, it's just got a lot of different options on there. It makes it not so hard, and it makes it kind of fun. You get to pick, you
Well,
get to gamify things. Yeah.
it reduces the cognitive load, right? And
Mhm.
that's really, we talked about that early on, is that when we're talking about cognitive load, as someone with I've mentioned this many times, I have ADHD, and for me, things that I'm interested in, I absorb like a sponge. Like I could learn something in a couple hours if I'm interested in it, and it may be highly complex. And if the voice is someone that if it was Robin Williams reading to me what
Mhm.
I was wanting to learn, I am soaking every bit of that up. But if it's some robot voice or teacher or something more generic, I probably am not going to be as engaged, even though the content's still the same. That makes I would have never thought about that at all. And that's a really cool. In NVDA and JAWS, I do have different voices. I use a British voice because you can actually separate Windows operating system voices and then inside the document you're reading voices. So you can kind of tell, oh, this is a Windows alert and this one is something in the document. But that's really cool. Sonya, you and I communicate. I think we should talk about this. I think it's an interesting thing.
Oh, yeah.
You and I communicate via LinkedIn, but we communicate in a different way. And I thought it was interesting because you had sent me a voice memo in LinkedIn. And when I originally got it, I texted you back and you're like, hey, I need you. I could process this better if you send me a voice memo. And what was interesting is I couldn't do it from the desktop. I actually had to pick up my phone and do it because the voice memo is only available on the mobile device, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah, and it's also the same thing in Teams. Teams app, if you're working with people remotely, asynchronously, what have you, same thing. So it's very interesting that these communication tools that we have available to us have a very different experience on the desktop, that there's not like a mic ready or whatever type of way of communicating versus doing it on your phone. But I will say that, back to your point about people just not even knowing about some of these tools, every time that I've told someone, oh, on LinkedIn, we can voice memo back and forth. Oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't know this was even a possibility. Yep. So there's a couple of different things. The experience for me to connect with someone, they don't give me the mic version. So again, right. It's the speech to text and hope and wish and pray that I get everything, spell checked right. Right.
Right.
Because that's another thing. I mean, it's a job and networking site. So you'd think that would be something that they would have built into the functionality, and it's not there. So it's an inconsistent experience. But once you do get in and you are connected, you can send voice memos back and forth. And like I was mentioning, like with Teams, a lot of times everybody's, just typing away. And yes, it will read out some of the messages on your desktop with the immersive reader. But in terms of how you can send the voice memos, you'll need to do those on the mobile version. So it is an interesting conundrum, right?
Right. Well, and what's interesting is, me having someone with ADHD, for me, processing, it was, in fact, we had been sending messages back and forth about scheduling this podcast. Mm-hmm. And there were times and dates that we were kind of listening to, going back and forth with. And what was interesting for me is that it was a barrier to listen to your voice memo because I couldn't remember the times. Literally, 5 seconds from listening to the message, opening Outlook, going to schedule the meeting, I'm like, crap, was that 10:30 or 9:30? And so I'd have to go back and listen to the message again, because you can't just scrub through it. You have to listen to the entire message. Mm-hmm. So I think I think it's interesting because we have to remember that one person's accommodation can be another person's barrier. And so we just have to be tolerant and understandable.
Yeah, and
that's accessibility at its core, isn't it?
Right.
That's basically accessibility, right? It is creating content in whatever method that could be interpreted by everyone, mm-hmm. right? And each person's method may not be ideal for the other, but it can be processed by everyone.
Yeah, if they had the transcript available, then it would be fine. And I know that's somewhere on their roadmap. I mean, I think, with all the job things that happened in the last couple of years, I think it just maybe has gotten lost in the shuffle. But I mean, I think it's a good point that we shouldn't just produce content in one way or the other. It really should be right. When I create something in typing, I also have it available in audio, because there's so many challenges just with how information is created and crafted that sometimes it doesn't work with the assistive technology or the user agents or whatever the tech terms are that are
Yeah.
in WCAG.
Well, I mean, LinkedIn still got a long way to go. You can't even apply alt text to when you reply to a message and you include an image, you can't apply alt text to that image. So if you made a post and I posted something else in there about your post and included an image, I have to provide the alt text as part of the body text for that post because it just again, it's a journey, right? We always say it's a journey. We're always trying to improve. As we close out here, Sonya, what would you like people to know about as a closing thought on the reading order and its importance?
The reading order is obviously very important. It's often just not something that's thought about, and a lot of people don't have training on it. So at the end of the day, if and when we have the ability to do trainings, to attend them, to get ready for things like open enrollment, things where a lot of people are going to need to participate, we really should be looking to that because, again, you never know when somebody has a hidden disability. It's the unknown user on the other side of the screen.
Awesome.
Well, once again, we want to thank Venngage for being the sponsor on today's podcast. Venngage is a design platform that's not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. So head on over to venngage.com to learn more. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.